So great to see everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's assembly that is hosted by artists and researchers Eva Davidova and Darko Vukić. Eva Davidova is based in New York. Darko is joining us from Serbia, and cultural organizer Natalia Ivanova Mount from Oakland, who is also director of Pro Arts Gallery and Commons, which will also be one of the sections of the conversation today. For those of you who are, first of all, thank you for everyone who are joining assemblies as we go from one week to another. But for those of you who are not familiar with assembly, it is a part of kind of HEKLER initiative, which is an artist-run platform and a transnational kind of community where we nurture critical conversation around hospitality and conflict through different programming, pedagogy, archiving, and residencies. And the Assembly specifically is a transnational space for cultural workers to share, discuss, and collectively imagine new ways of instituting based on the principles of self-organizing, community care, critical thinking, political education, distribution of resources, and healing, as well as commons that are kind of integral part of it. The assemblies alternate between reading groups and conversations with practitioners. And in June, we will start with Anti-Fear series that are a collaboration with New York-based artist and neurologist Sonia Bloom. We, in these conversations, invite everyone who is present to participate in different formats, as well is an extended kind of invitation to co-host, bringing the relevant questions and concerns to the table to be kind of unpacked and addressed collectively. Right now, we are, not just right now, but we are in the continuum of very repressive and violent governing. And we cannot start these conversations today without addressing what is happening specifically in the United States right now, and heavily militarized action against communities of color, and specifically the murder of George Floyd that happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which led to the series of uprisings throughout the country. Conversations today, the kind of artists and everyone present here comes from range of experiences and ways of dealing with these issues and addressing them either through arts, through organizing, politics, and just ways of kind of like coming together to figure out the ways of how we can actually resist and imagine and actively act towards some livable world, let's say. So technology is a big part of it, and today the host will actually address issues of agency, radical hospitality, and kind of like colonial as well and imperialist undertones that intertwine with these concepts. But also like with the direct kind of examples of and methodologies of how to actually tackle these, especially in the case of the Commons and Pro Arts in Oakland. Well, last Friday we had an amazing gathering with Rashmi Vishwanath and Dina Al-Adib, and Dina is here. I think Rashmi is also joining us. And then this conversation is a continuation of kind of discussion around, you know, how do we orient ourselves towards kind of like colonial notions of modernity and kind of the apocalypse that we are co-creating, and how are we centering ourselves within it. So I don't want to talk anymore. I would like to open it up to Darko, Natalia, and Eva, and thank you guys again for being awesome and for bringing your questions to the table for all of us to discuss. Darko, do you want to start?
Okay, I'll start. Thanks, Natalia, for this introduction, introducing us. Thanks to everyone for present now. Not being speaking in front of this amount of people in days. So yeah, if I should address from the most recent event that Natalia mentioned. It's hard to speak from my perspective, since I'm from Eastern Europe and Serbia, and that is whole another and different complex of perspective. And through my lenses, I haven't been aware of the like results of the video material that I witnessed until yesterday. And it is actually really horrific to see that, but I'm not sure how still to address about that, because I don't feel I'm like able to address anything still. I mean, it is like a strong investment, and riots that are rising from it are natural result and should be empowered and organized and orchestrated in different levels and different ways. But the topics that I will cover in a way, before I start to speaking about the background and my current involvement and general involvement in arts and social relations, are, I had to say it, but they are interdisciplinary in the background as the fundamental approach. So yes, I mean, speaking from the perspective of a person who lives currently in Serbia with all its complexities, it's not easy to have a general picture of global events, especially because our local involvements are not clear enough and settled down in a reasonable state. I will try to speak about the topic that we will, from which the first term that we would like to tackle upon, which is agency, and that I think it's the core term from which we relate to each other as agents, as socially aware and rationally aware agents and selves. So when I say agency, I mean our personal set of rules that are made from our ontological experiences being involved in interactions. And I will not read a bunch of texts, and I don't want this to become like some kind of reading sampling, but I will read just like one paragraph, which is on the back side of the book called Intelligence and Spirit by Rssx, which was also in the list of reading suggestions. So it says that once self-relation concretely becomes part of the order of thought that extends over into reality, nothing can stop the rise of intelligence. All given truths, all achieved totalities, all threats of history begins to slowly vanish like a spider's web baptized in a corrosive solvent. So when I say agency, and I understand all of you and all of us as agents in this global state, we have to, in a way, I mean, there is a lot of exploitation, especially exploitation, and that is related to this first topic that Natalia mentioned, like this injustice. There is a lot of hidden exploitation of empathy, especially, and truthness, like truth given terms in all procedures between localities that are intertwined in this or that way. So now when we speak about that, we have to speak from the inhumanist perspective, like in humanism is in a way the extended practical elaboration of humanism, and it's a vector of revision. So we have to constantly try to cast a revision upon current and past events, just to be sure that we are collectively, as a collective, group of agents, have like truthful revision of current events. So I will not talk too much to cut off the time for Natalia and Eva, but I will add on this perspective further on.
Okay, so I'll follow then, and because my name is Natalia, and I'm the director of a Pro Arts Gallery in Commons here in Oakland, and I'm tuning in from Oakland. But because we talked about the Exquisite Corps, I'll just continue with the autonomy. With the agency, and just riff on that for a second. In terms of agency, what we're doing here in Oakland is we're basically commonizing the arts, right? And collectivizing labor and reframing the value of art and artists within the current economy and within the current precipice of breaking down of the new normal, as we say, and going to a completely different way in which we organize and share resources, material and immaterial, and collectivize labor. We work with the notion of the commons as a way of, reframing the value of what we do and making connections between art and labor, and between and resituating artists within the communities, because we see that there are broken connections between artists and communities, and between institutions and communities for the arts, you know. And to that extent, in terms of agency, what we see is that the agency in terms of the art world means who produces art, how is art valued then, where is it produced, and how is it accessed, right? From the community, you know, from the audience. So we have begun to organize on grounds, you know, and again collectivize not only what we do as practitioners in the arts and culture workers, but also how we think about our role in society at this very moment. And there's many terms that are emerging now: first respondents, second respondents, you know, artists working at the intersection between social justice and wellness and protest and all of this. But in terms of agency, what I wanted to mention is that it is really difficult to collectivize on the basis of likeness, you know, because we all come from different places and we all have different ways of achieving what we want to achieve, you know, through our practices or through our artistic, you know, aspirations. And so what I wanted to mention is that within the commons, we have the opportunity of being autonomous, both in terms of agency and mission and goals and practices, and at the same time shift the idea from self-care to community care and radical openness via working together on the basis of deference rather than difference. So in other words, we're working at the intersection of major, you know, connective points, rhizomatic connective points that we can begin to deconstruct the hierarchies and the systematic oppressive system that we have been in a way complicit in the art world, all of us, for a long time. So via releasing, while staying autonomous throughout our practices, we also are looking forward to partnering and sort of like, collectivizing our efforts in terms of human rights, in terms of social justice, in terms of what we can do with our communities as artists and practitioners, but on the basis of our differences. That does not mean being the same. That means on the very opposite, creating transgressive spaces and new heterotopic spaces, we call them here in Oakland, through which we can relate, but in a different way. Again, through considering and keeping our agency and autonomy, yet collectivizing the material and immaterial resources that we all need, and acting on the basis of abundance rather than scarcity, and collaboration rather than competition, in order to achieve this new life that we all want for us, which is post-capitalism, basically, right? And I wanted to just finish by reading, because of the exquisite corpse thing, something that I wrote in my essay, which is reframing the value of art and art labor in fair labor in a sharing economy. The economics of art are active within the capitalist market system, hence it's only natural that they suffer the same consequences as other failing economic models that operate on the basis of perpetual scarcity in order to create monopolies. Assure profits are held by the 1% of the population through privileged market access, tax laws, and systematic racism, and homogenized and commodified culture, turning a producer society into a consumer society. Okay. So
thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I'm talking about this decentralizations. I remember conversation we had recently that it seemed very important to start looking at agency from a perspective that we are not acting upon something or somebody, and we are not acted upon, but there is the beginning of this dance of agencies that Andrew Pickering is talking of in one of the texts I included. And that not only includes humans or artists, but should include, and it's the only way we can go forward, should include animals, plants, everywhere, as many different allies as possible. I'm an artist, and I work with transpositions, paradoxes, the subconscious, the body. And I tend to transgress the affordances of things and how they work, and tend to connect seemingly unconnectable things. All paradoxes have in their flesh some kind of emergence of something new. Playing with one of these paradoxes, I imagine us as being built by our future descendants, humans or cyborgs or animals or chimeras, and pose a question. If we are the games our children will program one day, can we influence the code they're writing? Can we pull the genes of another reality into this one? Could we contaminate this reality with something else? And I guess by this I imagine that we have the agency to do something in the future as doing something in the past. Rashmi was talking the other day about rethinking the past and imagining and rewriting them in order to create new futures. And I think thinking about what the future is writing now is also important. And to end this small intro into our exquisite corpse, I'm going to read from Karen Barat, theoretical physicist and a renowned feminist theorist. It's a quote I've been pondering about on a long time. Agency is not held. It is not a property of persons, of things. Rather, agency is an enactment, a matter of possibilities for reconfiguring entanglements. So agency is not about choice in any liberal humanistic sense. Rather, it is about the possibilities and accountability entailed in reconfiguring material discursive apparatuses of bodily production, including the boundary articulations and exclusions that are marked by those practices. As I work a lot with technology, and especially more than with technology, about technology and its political implications, I'm more and more baffled of how easily we accept the extraction, the mesmerization of our minds, but also the total brutal exclusions of so many. And Nora Khan, in her essay, Naming Knowing, starts with Detroit neighborhood, where clearly racial profiling and technology have gotten to horrible heights and condition not only the day-to-day life of people, but their identity and their future actions.
Okay, I think we have more time to give some kind of additions to this first chain of our introduction segment. Yep.
Would anyone like to comment on anything?
I wanted first to have an addition of info upon this, because you triggered something that I haven't said. I mean, I would return to the first topic and the horrific. I mean, we are all in a way medialized through different medias and resources of informing. And since I saw the video with a cop kneeling on the head of a person, it was in a way, my question is, it could be posed like this. I was speaking about this with my friend when we were passing through some kind of underpassage in Belgrade, and I saw a girl who was sleeping on a cardboard, and I was like, oh my God, we are actually really automatized to see people and to not be even triggered emotionally or empathically in a way. And we are really too much medialized in that sense that we cannot we cannot like process that kind of reality anymore. For example, I was triggered by the body that was lying on the underground passage, and it was in a way like I was being on sedatives, and I was seeing the image, but I couldn't process that reality. It's the same way with the imagery of the cop kneeling on the head of a guy killed without any reason. And I was not even aware in the first time that it was like a question of killing anyone. But I firstly saw the video where he tells, let me breathe, and then I just like remember that phrase, because I didn't have like the whole picture, because my locality was like different. I was like infused with all sorts of different news and media. So yeah, that's one kind of obstacle. Like we are unconsciously programmed to, in a way, not be able to really involve in the reality of one happening an event. So that's the question of event, how we proceeded, how we process that, and what are the results of the impact on us personally, first of all. Then the second thing that popped in my mind is that since I was a kid, and that's like the fact, our in a way cultural and social fabric was really embedded through film production, film absorption with American culture in a way. For example, when I was sick and ill as a child, I couldn't sleep at nights. Really, like in the midnight, I was awake and I was really filled up with a lot of narratives, which are like horror, thriller movies, and so on. So in a way, that embedded in my psyche in a way. So in a way, when we speak about different culture and positions and operativeness and possibility to be operative, to be an agent in one's own cultural situation, is in a way really slicky. There is, for example, a really great work from Ricardo Basbaum, and it's called Supernoun. It's like a choreography of converging foliations, like interior, exterior, me and you, and he draw different diagrams that are like linked between how that relation between me and you is erased with interacting with different ways of interacting, because there are just lines of interactions and they are just arrows of the adjustment, like what is addressed to between each other. So that leads us to the question of like the structure and the epistemic principles and the questions of that in consideration of our current endeavors in our own ontological horizon. I mean, that's the most important key for understanding our community, like ontological horizon. How can we see sociality we're living in, and how can we make it better through the question of how can my own agency bring about apparatuses and things and procedures through which I can empower and make change in that locality, because we all now live in an encaged global world where the only question is how we vectorize our doings and workings between global and local scale. So that's my addition to this.
Just one note before we open space for questions and further conversation. Since we usually do introductions of like everyone, round introductions, everyone in the room. Just before you would speak, please take some time to introduce yourself and say where you're coming from and what brought you here. Thank you.
Me?
No, not you. You already represented.
Okay, sorry. Okay, I will mute myself now.
Well, I wanted to add something else. I think that what we're doing right now is further sort of not exasperated, but I see a huge emphasis of on technology in terms of actually physically uniting at this point, right? Because of the pandemic, we feel that, I think it's global, that term, that we are all sheltering and we are more and more dependent on platforms that, unite us, and especially in terms of activist platforms, that's where we go now. That's how we advocate, right? And I think it's important to think of technology this way, because I've been thinking, what platforms are we creating now, in a way, to continue doing what we're doing individually or collectively to break down this, the normal, whatever it is, right? That would replace the current, extractive platforms, for organizing. And again, is it the idea about art is about sociality and relational aesthetics, right? And the same idea about protest, Occupy was very much important and strong because we had the opportunity to have this that we gather in public space, right? So having the inability to do so today in order to voice our, to have a protest, one thing that we've been in Oakland, in a way using the opportunity of having this breakage in system to actually take all of our programs outside of the gallery walls, outside of the space, and begin to safely, but then urgently also reroute our work in the public sphere, in the public space, and I think that and that again brings the question of how do we continue doing so through the digital platforms that perhaps would be emerging or we have right now, because again, you know, there's so many problems with Zoom, even with infiltrating with neo-Nazis and all these kind of, these platforms we're using now are not perhaps the best platforms that we can unite on. So I think in terms of agency and practices and looking forward to, I'm interested also in hearing what the audience think about the very basic things of what we do has been sort of like shifting and being replaced today with online organizing, even if that's self-organizing. That brings me to another point, which is online organizing is very global, right? And at the same time, we're working, all of us, very locally within our communities, especially because of, especially in America right now, right? In terms of what's happening. So how do we continue building this momentum and these mutual aid networks in ever-shifting technology and I guess new modernity-based environments, shall we say, right? In order to continue supporting ourselves, our communities, each other, ourselves through community care and global action, intercultural action. Anyway, I don't know why I have a question. I'm supposed to be answering the question, but this is my exquisite course question to all of you, you know? Anyway, okay.
Maybe I wanted to touch on, Natasha, could you enable my sharing of a screen?
I think you have, the share icon screen on the middle of the screen.
Yeah, but the host has to enable it.
I wasn't aware of it.
Oh, it's okay. I just wanted to touch on the question of public space.
Eva, can you try it now?
Oh, now I can.
Your background is so magnificent that we are all just looking at your background.
Mesmerized.
Mesmerized by your background.
What are you seeing? Are you seeing still my background, or you're seeing?
No, we're seeing your work.
Okay, so I wanted to touch on the question of public space, which is not so public anymore. It has been completely privatized and used for oppression instead of gatherings or assemblies, and how the information, the technologies, which are sold as tools, but in reality, they're systems very well designed, very well organized systems of influence on our brains and our actions, have completely become this public space, and still even less, they're even more private than the public space, the architectural public space. So I was wondering if we could, instead of thinking about information about the digital space as architecture, which is somehow related to civilization, to oppressive architecture, to building, to structuring. If we could imagine this new digital space that we're creating more as a forest or as a series of gardens with interlinking with connections through bodies, through animals, through exchange of soils. And if we can imagine a kind of package of nutrients that artists and thinkers and everybody has to be making to make the soil of this new digital space grow in a different way. Another thing that Natalia touched upon and Darko before that, and we often think, is how we relate to each other. And I just wanted to show you briefly this work, which was done a few years ago when I literally wanted to translate the cruelty that we inflict upon animals in many, many different ways into my own body, because I do believe that the cruelty we inflict upon animals and people in distant countries without even knowing it, this gives ideological room to inflict this same cruelty to even the closest to us. And we see this expanding exponentially. So this was one visceral reaction of mine to this issue of remoteness. Thankfully, most of my animations are short.
Yes, that was great. Thank you, Eva.
Thank you.
Do we have more time for remarks before we interact with our participants present?
Well, maybe it's better to open now for the conversation, and then we can, the remarks can be woven to
Okay.
to the group.
We can go back and forth.
Yeah.
Let's make it as organic as possible.
Yeah, of course.
As you can see, I'm wearing flowers.
As you can see, me and Darko are drinking beer.
And smoking, which I'm very envious.
I was camouflaging it with the glass, but yeah, you already caught me. Okay.
Does anyone have any comments or questions?
Please.
Raise your hand.
Raise your hand.
Okay, so I'm gonna call people out. I would like to ask Sonia, considering that a lot of your focus is the comments, to maybe, give some opinion in terms of the dance of agency and see how that actually intertwines within your like either personal practice or understanding of the participation in the art world as a kind of like neoliberal capitalist formation.
Mhm.
Oh, I need to, yeah, we can't hear you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just saying thanks, Natasha, for putting me on the spot with just like the first and then like, you know, three-pronged question. But I'll start off with just, I guess a thought that just follows from what Eva was just talking about, and it's not answering any of your questions, Natasha. But I will get to my practice and I guess all of that. But I was just thinking about this, and I guess this also follows what Natalia was saying, just sort of being in this space that we are in now, this platform, social media, and you know, across the nation, across the world. So being, in a sense, in this platform, which opens up certain lines of possibility, but also in a lot of ways feels like being squeezed or like herded, you know, from the public form, like architectural public space, where I guess at least intuitively and in reality, like in physical space, there is more potential for privacy and autonomy in a lot of ways. Like here, there is like zero potential for privacy, at least, and everything that is happening on this platform is viewable by some other entity, and we all know that. And so my, you know, the interesting thing for me, and this relates to my practice because as a neurologist and artist, I think a lot about what happens in our heads and how that influences our agency, and how we relate to each other. But being in this space and knowing that we are visible to individuals and entities, you know, what is that doing to the nature of our communication? And also what is that doing to the nature of the things that we discuss? You know, is that cutting out some boldness? Is that cutting out honesty? Is that cutting out, or is that adding something, just the fact that we're connected in this way? So I feel like that's really interesting for me, like to think about what kind of commons are, you know, both the possibilities and the kind of this kind of panopticon kind of situation that we're in. What is that doing to the possibility of being as autonomous individuals and collectives, because we truly are in a glass bowl. And I find that troubling and interesting. So I was just thinking about like, how can we even think about overcoming this condition, which is just, you know, like, this is all mineable information. So this is completely extractable, every single word here, right? An image. And so is there a way to kind of undermine that through retreating into absurdity or creating like other, like how can that be inverted into an opportunity? And that just sounds like something fun to talk about. Yeah.
Thank you, Sonia. Sahar, would you like to continue with your dream logic on this? And by the way, he's an amazing artist.
Okay, sure. Actually, why don't I
say something about the New Economies platform that you're also like co-developing with your friends?
Okay, yeah. I'm looking up the definition of dream logic right now because I'm writing about it. Hi, my name's Sahar. I'm a video artist and performance artist, and I live in Brooklyn. And thank you, Hekler and Natasha, for holding this, and for all the artists that are here sharing together. So I'm working on a project called New Economies, New Internet, which is actually very much about gardening, very much about planting seeds as a way of thinking through things like mourning and radical joy and coming together to kind of weave our cultural I guess we were talking about differences, right? Like our cultural nuances and our forms of kind of communication, language, and consciousness together through a kind of historical lens, which is to think about maybe this way of how do we position ourselves within this kind of panopticon. Like how do we position ourselves to make this kind of absurdist gesture that would kind of be a way to maybe be in solidarity towards thinking through things in a new way or through creativity and healing. So basically what New Economies, New Internet is a way that I'm trying to bring artists together globally to talk about how we can think about new modes of economy through creativity and healing. And one of the things that's a guiding principle in that process is something that I'm calling dream logic, which I think, Eva, you will really like. But so dream logic is a culturally informed practice in abstraction and communication which centers the body politic. It reimagines surrealism within the context of time-based digital methodologies through an anti-colonial lens in which the nonlinear is the framework for a logical criticality. Dream logic uses our intuition and dream world alongside our knowledge base to bring us back to an earth without borders at the end of extraction and within our place in nature and history alongside our ancestors. So that again, within this kind of historical anti-history, kind of repositioning ourselves in the world in a way that is grounding us in this moment where we're being told that you know, time has pushed up against us and is no longer multi-directional. It is no longer that there's no longer any more access to agency, when in fact that will never be the case, no matter where you are, who you are, and what you're doing, because you exist. And even if I didn't exist, even if I was dead, the memory of me would have that active quality, and that is also speaking to our ancestors and nature.
Awesome, thank you. Dina, do you want to say something?
It sounds like we have a project that I wanted to be involved in. That's what it sounds like to me. Yeah, Ava and is it Sahar, Sonia, like the last three comments, basically, I feel like right there is a project that we can weave into making, yeah, I mean, I have not, like right now, I'm just like, I'm excited about the three of you talking in sequence. I think that's a great conversation. You're in conversation with each other, and I'm definitely there. And Natasha, let's find a way to, you know, move this assembly into not just an assembly, but a place where we're actually maybe doing this work, right? Some of the suggestions, like Lawrence, I don't know, Lawrence, you might want to say something that is related to the intervention that you just texted about. Do you want to do that? That's an example of how we can just, you know.
Sure. I mean,
yeah.
First of all, you can just choose any background. Of course, I'm always wanted to be on the set of The Price is Right in late stage capitalism, so why not? It's very important. And then if you just, they provide this thing for you that if you just click, I have a green screen, if your computer can, you know, as Krisztian pointed out on the chat, not every computer has these options, you know, but you can say, I have a green screen, and then it looks like this. And that's, you know, whatever, that's somewhat obscure.
Sorry, Lawrence, to interrupt. Do you have your camera on? I can't even find you here.
Oh, here?
Like, I can't even find you, period. Like, not your name. There's no, yeah, I mean, on the text I can see you, but there's no camera.
He's a very dangerous person, so he's
I know, I'm like, I want to know how you do that.
Like
completely invisible.
Wow. I'm more technical.
You know?
Is this part of the intervention? Because I'm liking it, and explain how, because I think this should be part of this intervention we're all talking about.
Wow. But can everybody see me? But you can really see, like you can see I'm kind of waving now, right?
I can see you. I can see you, Larry.
You don't exist in my thread.
Ah.
Only in my text. Only in my, I see your text. I see you exist via text, but otherwise you don't exist.
He's an AI.
I'm totally a bot. First of all, I'm an authoritarian bot, but
Oh, wow.
I just wanted to say hello.
Okay,
Yeah.
you just came up. Okay.
Oh, good. Okay, good. So yeah, I know there's a lot of things like that where if you click around and mess around, it's like being tactical, right? It's like détournement. If you can deturn some of these features in these programs, it's not the solution. It's just a temporary thing, you know. And there's different features in the program, you know. So that's just something that a little way to make it a little more obscure. Of course, you can just have your camera off, right? My understanding is with Zoom, someone told me, and again, everybody tell me if this is true, if you just kind of leave the Zoom program on and you're not using your computer, the Zoom program can still take images of your desktop. So we can just see the names of files that you left on your desktop and things like that. So they can harvest weird information like that. I don't know of what use it will be, but there's all kinds of insidious things with all of these programs to harvest data in every way. So it's just good to practice good data hygiene if you can. And like, you know, wash your hands after you go outside and then wash your screen, you know, turn everything off and have data harvesting hygiene when you use these programs.
Well, just to comment
Zoomology.
quickly on Dina's remark in terms of the bringing this into action. Actually, with Sahar and her collaborator Anima Korea and Sonia, in terms of in the context of anti-fear series, we're actually going to conduct the workshop on kind of imaginary metrics that will happen in June. So we will all be informed about that and to actually like test this in practice.
I don't know how to raise my hand, so can I mention something? I don't know how to raise it on Zoom, so I'm doing this. Anyway, so two things, kind of like in response to Dina, but one thing I wanted to mention is that, and after Sonia as well, we are actually playing with the idea of absurdity through a project that we created as part of a common knowledge platform residency, which we started in January 2019 at ProArts Commons, and which basically is a short-term residency through which international artists can get together and actually brainstorm new projects and new ways of affecting the system or changing the system of in the arts, is in particular, or expanded field of the arts. But I wanted to mention about this project because maybe we can all even try that project together. But we're launching something called Performing the Commons, which is a Dadaist approach to actually our work for the next 3 years. So in other words, we will, and we have copywritten Performing the Commons. It's an institutional script, we call it, and we will be performing everything that we do, which now becomes copywritten with a capital A in the Constitution. But it gives us the opportunity to really affect systems and try new systems, which otherwise we wouldn't. For example, we could be performing UBI for artists, which we are trying to do this project here in Oakland, Universal Basic Income for Artists, and so forth and so on. Performing it, though, gives us the agency of again, testing intellectual property and different parts of the system within what constitutes performance rather than actual action, right? So in a way, subverting the very concept of action and protest through Dadaist and other kind of like situationist-like approaches, and through printing actually pamphlets and manifestos and creating a database of pledges for a new world through working with artists and other communities that we work with already. We believe it's a good way, again, of engaging, especially right now where things are all going online and our activism is happening online, most of it, to again, to engage in a performative sort of like artistic way of testing new ways of working with each other in hierarchies and new systems, you know. And second of all, I just wanted to mention that, and Eva was part of that, and talking about how we know each other. We worked on many, many projects, but one of them actually in 2017, I co-organized a festival called Imagining Post-Capitalism. And it was a really interesting way, because it was a hybrid festival, and you know, of course, knows about that too, of getting some ideas out there and just having a breathing space for imagination. Because I think what's happening with a lot of us is that we're so active and we're so busy trying to change the world that a lot of the times we don't take a breathing moment to actually assess what are the resources and what are the goals that we have, right? And having the ability to create a festival, which was basically pretty much performances and sort of like reading groups and talks, through which we actually imagined the new world, was extremely important to us. So in my practice at the moment, we're trying to actually slow down and enable the growth, if you will, in order to really strategize on new ways of, again, breaking down those oppressive systems that we all live through, especially in the arts. But again, these moments of us uniting and actually imagining a new world, I think is super important, rather than always responding to a crisis, because those don't stop, especially in America, you know. So I feel like this is also a good way to think about the future, is to how can we get together and imagine something that is beyond our imagination. And that's difficult because, again, we're responding to crisis modes individually or collectively, but having that breathing moment is really important.
I have a question related to that. How does the participation in kind of like nonprofit industrial complex fit into the distribution of resources? And in terms of thinking of resourcefulness, like, do we think of commodified labor or decommodified labor? Because as you know, kind of getting into the modes of productions that are required by a nonprofit, and kind of like toxic philanthropy that is actually kind of like checking the boxes of like desired agendas in order to support the projects of certain kinds, is actually like counterintuitive to what the resistance to and like walking towards like post-capitalist context is. And for example, like in terms of HEKLER, like we purposefully are not going to be incorporated, and actually the projects that we are realizing are funded from our daily jobs that are, you know, some of us don't have jobs right now. We are practically on stimulus checks. Does that fit? That brings the question of like self-exploitation. So how can we simultaneously self-exploit and you know, talk about commons? So for me, you know, there is like an intentional decision to actually act from a certain position, and that no longer is self-exploitation, because it's an intentional decision to actually act, distribute, and think of oneself as resourceful, even though the resources as conventional one that are, you know, like the resources of 1% are definitely not accessible, or any of the funders who would actually support the project in some kind of like meaningful, like not meaningful, but like impactful financial way. So how does, I guess the question is for everyone here who organize on that level, what are your thoughts about participation in this kind of system?
Well, if I may, I'll just answer very quickly how we are doing it. So we're so yes, so ProArts is a non-profit organization that existed, that started in Oakland in 1974. When it started, it was actually an umbrella service organization that was sort of like supporting actually administrative arts labor and artists through distributing grants that at that point, there's a program called CETA, which was very similar to the WPA program, which was basically portioning federal money to different counties here. So when I began looking into the commons model, like basically I thought about the commons as the only way that we can bypass the institutional system that we have been participating in, which is the non-for-profit industrial complex, right? So in other words, co-ops, it's already legalized, right? So I didn't want to do co-ops. I didn't want to co-op. I didn't want ProArts to become a co-op because it would again enter a legal system that is already, and taxation system that is already established. For me, the commons is the renegades. In other words, there's no legal formation as the commons. I cannot legalize this, right? Not like the non-profit status, and also there's no taxation. And so for us, the commons is a way of basically playing with the system, or going not contra, but besides the system, and organizing within a system that does not serve us. However, having the non-for-profit status of ProArts, and that is why it's ProArts Gallery and Commons, has been very beneficial because I can then apply for grants that actually provides money for the cultural workers that support the projects for the commons. So I try to play both games at the moment, because currently we are very much in a situation where we cannot actually support, we cannot actually implement mutual aids. Like, in other words, the commons in the future will mean that it's a self-sustainable model. However, at that very present moment, the commons is basically uniting and sharing material, immaterial resources in order to come up with new ideas and ways of actually breaking the non-for-profit industrial complex. But again, where I am using that, perhaps, the critique could be, capitalist in a way, because I'm trying to raise money through the non-profit system in order to fund this new pilot that we're trying to do, which is unfundable, and many people, of course, think it's radical and nobody would support it. Eventually, I hope that we can have a model just like the co-op, where we invest in those kind of networks and models, and that's how we run the art system. But at present time, again, I'm sort of like going besides the system, not contra or with, but besides, I would like to use, in order to disempower the very non-profit complex by suggesting new ways of formations and collective labor. My essay I wrote because I've been working in this non-profit world for 20 years, and most of the time I would get paid $100 a week, and I have 2 master's degrees, and it has been horrifying for me to find out that that all of us, especially the cultural workers, have been doing what we've been doing for the longest time under the premises of self-enslavement, right? We do that. We say yes to projects knowing that, we won't actually have food or rent money, right? So again, my hope is through, in a way, modeling this, performing the commons idea, we will get to a point where we'll be able to see the validity in having a stand against the current system. Again, because in my cultural organizing for the longest time, it is really difficult to convince people to drop out of the system, and we see that today because we can say, no, don't get back to work. At the same time, some people have to get back to work because they will be on the streets. So it's a catch-22, and I'm just trying to use every little resource that I have to maybe even cheat the system in a way. If I can have funding through the non-for-profit and feed the commons model, then be it.
Thank you.
That's my strategy.
I would like to call Edith and Flavia to join the conversation. They're curatorial collective from Cluj, Romania. And you recently shared some like trajectories that you are considering in terms of collaboration with IT sector, but from the perspective of kind of like critiquing the medium. So kind of like to bring it back, the idea of commons and technology together, but also gentrification. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and kind of your positioning within it?
Yes, thank you. So we are Flavio and Edith from Cluj, Romania. We're trying to find ways in which to tackle this sort of human resource of a lot of really smart and creative people, which unfortunately in our city, usually the access they have to culture is quite limited. In the sense that it's really this very mainstream type of cultural events which are tailored towards the so-called IT crowd. And we would really like to find ways in which to tap sort of this growing IT sector, which is also gentrifying the city a lot, to bring it back to a sort of more critical thinking kind of place. Yeah, so our project, I mean, we didn't get funded. We also tried doing the sort of asking for money, and it's been unfortunate that we found out last week or 2 weeks ago that we're not getting any funding. So it's quite difficult to see in what way we have to organize right now in terms of actually getting people to come together and take their time for meeting. So we'll see. I mean, it's also this moment when nothing is really being allowed to happen in outside of online spaces in Romania.
Like we tried for a long time to just.
Can you just get a little bit closer to the mic?
Just like we've tried for a long time to like also pay the people that we are collaborating with, so kind of giving them like
an artist fee or a contribution fee.
So now we're like at this point that we don't really know how to keep up with this practice basically, and just make use of that. So.
But what about the question of scale? Is it a matter of like funding for labor or funding for production?
I think it's both, yeah. And like the whole art scene here is in this situation of really being on a survivability level, right? So I think everybody's really focused on just finding ways of actually aligning with the system. Just because not doing that would mean having to just leave the art world in a way, right? Because there's no way of being sustainable if you're not somehow part of it. I don't know. I mean, at least there's this general conception in a way, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
But I think this in a way touches the core question of the agency, because we are in the midst of speaking of economical impact of our activities and involvement in one side, and in other speaking about voluntary practices like enthusiastic, even if it's like totally insane to be enthusiastic in this kind of world. But what I wanted to say in the regard to what Natalia said already, and Natasha's question, is that somehow I think that we should be careful and cautious when speaking about infrastructures or future developments of any kind of procedural, projectile kind of thinking in our communities. The problem is that we should be careful with the idealisms that are hidden somehow as threads in those platformic organizational levels that are funded, infused. They are infused with already exploitative and already exploited terms and language, like in linguistic kind of sense. So when I say that, I think that there is a necessity to rethink and redistribute, recalibrate our sense of a given vocabulary in art practice and in art localities. And that means that we should rethink already like those for political correct terms and notions and all others that share the same function. And that comes also one more important term, which is also function beside agency. What is the function of the activity of one's agency is also an important one. How deep can we go with it? So yeah, that was the notion of the thing. So if we have, for example, hypothetically speaking, a body of agents working on one mission without any infusion of money and economical impact, how can we treat that beside any other? And also there is emergent necessity of weaponization of language towards the mechanisms of our resistive apparatuses towards like injustice in this or that sense, not just in art, but in our social involvement and a given social fabric. How can we intervene in the social fabric? It's really important question. So, for example, the Sakhar's project that she's involved, it's a really interesting example with that dream logic applied in activity and production of content is really important, because if some theory and extraction and replication of some theory is applicable upon social fabric and social involvement, that means that it has some kind of possible function that is real. When I say real, I mean it really involves in social fabric and really does involve with making a shift and different approach to development. And so when I'm thinking about dream logic, I can only say that reminds me of, let's say, intersection between mysticism and sciences, which is not common to speak about in regular kind of feedback loop. And also Indian mathematics and Far Eastern traditions applied into contemporary sciences and theories. So that in a way calls for emergent redistribution of extracted material from our elaborations from language theory and different other fields of knowledge. I mean, that's really important because we are stuck in a way, and if we stay stuck in the same exploited already political correct terminology and all other terminology, which is like NGO funded, etc., we will be in a way screwed up and fucked up. So that was the point.
Thank you, Darko.
I wanted to say that I very much agree with Darko, and I think we do need to take the leap of imagination and use the language and whatever we have in our power, at least to imagine the unimaginable. For example, when we talk about distribution of funds and resources, we cannot accept that we have to play with the system anymore. We have to imagine ways of completely bringing it down, because it's obvious that charity is like a cancer on the problems, and the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, as the poet said. So we have to start, look up and see how to seize the power that it's there, and see how to destabilize it every possible way. We have to be kind of I don't know, a grass that cracked the concrete, or imagine imagination of others. So by accumulation, these dream kind of objects. André Breton said in 1924, I propose the fabrication, insofar as possible, of certain objects which are approachable only in dreams. And for me, this means not to produce surreal dream images, but to produce projects like Sakhaeifar or like Natalia's or like yours, Natasha and Josh and Jelena, and really go beyond what we think as possible and into what we think is crazy. I don't know if I've made myself understood, but I feel that we have to use every possible language and symbol and model and simulation to do that.
I think it's also important to latch on that idea to break the vernacular that we have currently, because the vernacular that we have is very much about the institutional power in the arts and the non-profit complex and the oppressive systems. So with imagining the new world, you know, I think that what we have been talking about for the past couple of hours has been one way to imagine the new world is to create a new vernacular and new systems, right? What would space look like? What would gathering look like, right? What would autonomy look like? What would collectivism look like, you know? But that's what I was saying, is that I think it's important to also imagine and again, even through absurdist means, one new vocabulary begins to exist and emerges, you know? And this new vocabulary, I think, and this new vernacular is based on our culturally situated interactions, right? And I think that that's why we all, though coming from different perspectives, we all agree on one thing: the system is rotten, needs to come down. What will come up, I think, will be a collective imagination that hopefully will create this new vernacular and these new spaces and these new interactions that are not extractive and they're not oppressive. But again, in my work, I'm very, very dedicated and committed to do that bottom up rather than top down. I think this is the first and foremost way of allowing for this radical imaginary and radical hospitality, radical openness to emerge, is we haven't listened to really the communities that we've been trying to either connect to or serve for a long time, you know? And I think that now that we work with a new unhoused collective emerging from Oakland and Berkeley called Cardboard and Concrete Collective. And just the idea of turning even for me, turning the agency around and giving the agency back to just to the community to drive the narrative, to drive the artwork, to drive the events, to drive the community. What would it look like for us to just open our space and have people just come and do work in the space? You know, all of this again is related to agency, but it's also related to the way we decentralize the system. And the only way to decentralize it, in my experience, I had to give my autonomy to those who can actually drive it bottom up, as in grassroots activism, right? And so I, you know, in terms of vernacular, even I started questioning my position, my agency within what it is to be a curator. I don't want to curate things. I want to collaborate with people on projects, right? So while we start breaking these dynamics and hierarchies and question the inside-outside dynamic that we've always had within the art world, I believe that these new imaginaries will begin to exist, because though we feel stuck right now, we do know one thing: we've always been able to depend on each other, and we always have our back, right? You know, and I think that's the connections that we cannot lose. And we have to keep driving the conversation bottom up and not top down, as we have been in the past.
Can I say something?
Mm-hmm.
Dakota.
I think part of what that brings me back to, and what we're thinking a lot about in terms of new economies, new internet, is like care economies and systems of care, and sort of centering within our project, centering like disabilities politics and people with disabilities, as well as sort of like marginalized communities within the context of how we architecturally, people were speaking on, but structurally in terms of information and data, in terms of thinking about reforms that at least like thinking about within the context of care economy, and sort of letting that into the space of the commons, or allowing the space of the commons to cohabitate within this context of thinking about what it means to actually support one another through care, and that how that is actually very much about a certain kind of revolution and a kind of nonviolence that is really, really impactful. When, for example, we look at what's happening, yes, burn this shit down, but at the same time, like, there are Trump insurgents who are instigating, instigating. They're literally, there was a police officer who was caught like lighting something, a building on fire. They're like people who are instrumentally taking over these spaces of trauma and these spaces of resistance and like militarizing them. And what we're interested in doing is gazing back at the military apparatus, is shifting that space, or making our position known through things like care economies within the context of like new economies and commons infrastructures.
Actually, can I just follow up on that?
Actually, Sonia, sorry, Dakota wanted to say something, and Krisztian.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Dakota, you want to go?
Hi, I just want to say something quickly. I live in New York. I'm an artist. I'm hearing a conflict between like a resistance against big technology, but then wanting to access the commons. And I don't know how like we can create something as big as Facebook or Instagram to lead for justice with, has an artist who's applying for grants. And I think that there's gonna have to be some sort of like compromise as creatives, where we have to, I don't know, meet people where they're at, like if, I don't know, that's all I want to say, because I think there's a lot of like excitement around these new like developments and what, these sort of like DIY grassroots like websites and everything. But I'm also, I work with youth, and they get their news online from Instagram and Facebook. They're not going to like interesting artist websites. So I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
Well, that
Question first. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Thanks, moderator.
Because Sonia wanted to follow up on Sahar's comment, I would go afterwards, if that's okay. Because I would.
Just a brief comment in terms of just thinking through, just activating our imagination, imagining possible new ways of working collectively, and subverting some of these kind of conglomerate kind of like oppressive structures. One thing I think a lot about in my practice, and I'm collaborating with HEKLER, and now most recently with Zahar and Amina as well, in terms of just looking at fear. And fear, what we are afraid of, we give our power to. So I'm really super interested in working on just looking at what are we afraid of, and what happens when these fears are placed in collectives, publicly, privately held fears, and examining this fear and actually using that as a starting point to think about the commons and our connection, because I think that there's just a lot of information in that, and fear as like a place that extracts a lot of our power. So it's a form of regaining power and agency through examining anxiety and fear. And so in any case, that's actually an offshoot of Assembly is anti-fear sessions, which we'll be holding in parallel starting in June, and really looking at that.
Krisztian.
I just kind of wanted to point out that a lot of the things that we talk about is actually against an actually existing and working system of cultural production, but there are many places on earth that we don't have a actually working system of cultural production or other support structure than one, as it was coming from Flavius and Edith's example. So of course we can kind of try to tear down the system if we have alternative meanings to that, but then what is the case when, you know, how can we imagine something when even our living is extremely connected to that one system that exists and wouldn't allow, I mean, like, there's no institutional framework in these cases. There's no big enemy other than the state maybe to kind of fight against. So I think if we do develop tactics, I mean, like, I also don't necessarily believe that a lot of the tactics we talk about can be universal. I think we can learn a lot from each other, but we have to do our work to translate it to our specific context. But, you know, I mean, like, I would be really interested to hear people's ideas on solutions of, okay, I don't have money. How can we exchange for something else? You know, how can I still value your labor without me actually paying you? I mean, like, I got into a situation quite recently that somebody got upset because of a certain project we couldn't pay that person. And, you know, I was really starting to think, okay, if I cannot offer you monetary value because the system that I'm existing in doesn't allow me to gather that monetary value in the way that I would like to, what else I can give to someone? So, you know, maybe that's something we can share with each other and kind of understand those situations when there is no institutional system to fight against, or if there is, it's the only way we can survive.
Darko, do you still want to comment?
Yes, but I can wait after Eva comments on Dakota's point. So.
Cool.
Wait,
Unmute.
We can't hear you.
I was muted. That's why you couldn't hear me. There is always an explanation. Thank you, Darko, and thank you, Dakota, for bringing that up. I think it's super relevant, super relevant, because I do think that through decades of presenting technologies as tools and as a convenience and as the only place where we are going, and elevating techno-solutionism to the top of the future dreaming, big tech companies have achieved us to feel trapped or excluded if we don't participate in their systems. But, for example, a few months ago, I asked Nishant Shah, who is a very interesting guy to read and listen to. I asked him, well, what would happen, for example, if tomorrow, like from now to tomorrow, suddenly information, data cannot be sold or bought anymore, that it's completely impossible to buy or to sell. We would say the same as air, but air already can be bought and sold. So everything falls into this economy problem. It's a problem of money, it's a problem of greed, it's a problem of power, which wants more money to have more power and more so on. It's not a problem that the system, it either functions or doesn't function and everybody has to be there, but it's a problem of how to stop the principal drive of the system, which is accumulation of money or some kind of goods. And I think we have to imagine what would happen. Nishant answered that to an utopic question. He has to answer with a utopian answer, but the meat of his answer was that we have to keep the body visible, meaning the labor, this, and we have to keep the messiness. We have to keep everything interacting in a messy, organic way, so we don't completely get, as Sonia mentioned before, squeezed into this path, this only path. There have to be more paths. And I also briefly wanted to thank Krisztian for his question and for, but want to disagree completely, because I don't think it's a question that the institution is the only thing that we can rebel with, or the government, sorry, but we have to rebel against this same accumulation or scarcity economy system, because government per se does not have to be driven by macro corporations and exploitation.
Nehama, would you like to comment and maybe introduce the new poetics of labor? It kind of fits into the conversation.
Sure. First, I'm sorry I came late and missed like half the conversation and introduction, but these questions of labor and value of labor we are also looking at. New Poetics of Labor is a research platform we launched in 2018, asking these questions, and ended up making an exhibition with artists whose work also dealt with exploring these ideas of labor. But our first edition was kind of just like opening a conversation for it. And actually a lot has changed, especially in New York, with like people growing interested in this conversation. So it's actually exciting to hear everyone talking about it now. But we're also in a place where like we don't have any funding. We are not an NGO or 501c3 nonprofit, and are also asking questions about not self-exploiting ourselves to continue our work. So I don't know, we've kind of found ourselves in a strange place of wanting to do work and talk with people and do projects and organize, but not wanting to do it on our own time without any money or our own money from other jobs to support it. So I don't know, because we continue to ask these questions without any kind of real concrete answers, I don't know, like I'm trying to think, I've been thinking like on this downtime of like, I don't know, like what are good ways to organize, but like not just like in a collective moral supportive community, but like with real results where we could sustain ourselves. And we are obviously working within the capitalist structure where I don't know, like how do you work around the system without working within the system? And I don't know, I am aware of also like this other organization called the Cultural Workers Education Center, CWEC, started by Natasha Bunton, she's trying to actually begin a cultural workers union, and so has been studying union organizations across museums in the tri-state area and beyond in the United States. So I don't know, like I think also it's interesting that we're all coming from different backgrounds, like from the European model and United States, and also like looking at models that exist outside of this Western construct of like the art institutions. But yeah, so I don't know, I just have more questions than answers at this point, and am interested in talking about it with everyone here.
Thank you, Nahama. Natalia.
Can I say something? So what we found out, maybe like a direct response, what we found out is that in order to replace, so we work parallel to the capitalist system, not against it. So in order to get, like, to basically replace one system with another, we have a strategy to tackle three, I guess, important things, which is money and how we value labor, right? So I was going to say, in response, we are thinking about social currency, right? And what would that mean? And in terms of reframing the value of what we do, but not depending on a financial exchange for our services and for our labor. What we're working on at the moment is creating a partnership. So, you know, you could call it alternative currency, but I've been thinking for the longest time of creating partnerships through which, for example, you know, you have a landlord who would take a month's rents based on a partnership that we create through the commons. We can all talk about, hey, how great it is to value each other, and not, if it's helpful, is strategies that we can create partnerships through which this social currency that we're imagining is actually transactional in terms of actual value within the capitalist system, like either that be movie tickets for free, or I don't know, food with a co-op, with local co-op, or rents, you know. So again, replacing the financial system that we depend on through within the idea of the commons would mean for us is that we start valuing our labor in a different way, but again, only through partnerships and collaborations that are mutually supportive, right? Again, you know, like you, second thing that we're trying to do is to create this UBI, Universal Basic Income, but only for artists and cultural workers in Oakland as a pilot, right? And not go through federal and government money, but actually fund it through community money, basically, and hopefully, you know, good foundations or whatnot. But again, we're trying to replace, biggest thing is replacing the money with something that is actually, we actually can live on and breathe on, right? Because we all need that, right? And then the second thing I was going to mention is that I think there's a lot of conversations about, you know, how we actually, who we actually say the producers of culture and art these days, right? And that's where I think we have the real ability, and I'm excited about that, to actually you know, to actually get away from the professional artist, right? Because if we allow for hybridity and access from other cultural makers and producers, just like, okay, we all, like, some of us are from Eastern Europe, you know, the folk, right? The traditional, the shamanistic, you know, performance, all of this, if that is now called art, then we have the ability to actually reframe who are the cultural producers, where is culture being made, and who is being remunerated currently financially through financial market for this labor, right? And if we change all of this along with strategizing for supportive systems, you know, and again, what we do is we say, hey, we don't have money, but guess what? We have projectors, we have space, we have staff, we have, like, well, we'll hook you up with other people. So the replacing again the honorarium at some point with other material or immaterial labor in order to support something bigger than two of us, I think that's where, at least that's my answer. That's all we can do. Imagine a different world without the financial systems known to us at present. You know, again, if my landlord gives me free rent because I work in an art institution, I'll be as happy as making $2,000 a month, you know. It's just the way we think about how we're being remunerated for what we do, you know, and just embody, again, back to the embody these commons. We actually, to embody them, you know, and to advocate for our labor and for our value, you know, whoever we are within the system.
Well, in that sense, it's important also to, as we did in some like previous conversations, to stress the problematics of professional artist, or just like professionalism within arts, and how it actually serves the kind of exploitative and like very limited agency system that we have right now. And interestingly, with the now as we go through the economic recession, there is a more push of artists who do have and then who would perpetually were getting like financial support either through grants or direct institutional support to actually distribute their, not necessarily funds, but at least the agency, in terms of it was interesting to see some artists who are being constantly nominated for different awards, and you know, kind of like got into that cycle of recognition, to now think of like recommending, you know, asking in like open forum who are the people who would like to be considered for certain awards, so they can actually kind of like put their name out there. Which is also like one way of doing it, but it continues perpetuating and giving like a legitimacy to the institutions as they are right now. And I completely agree with Natalia in terms of, you know, especially going through this process of, as kind of like marked as a portal and the crisis that actually can bring these imaginative processes to the foreground and actually actualize them, depending on the context, in whatever capacity. The huge question is real estate, where that's the only kind of firm commodity for the 1% that is actually like not failing them. And now when we are going through like national rent strike, we are actually seeing the domino effect of the reality of withholding the monetary value of housing right. And I think that everything that we are talking about is pretty much in line with abolitionist kind of thinking, where in order to really think of commons and get to the place of kind of commons reproduction, and at least in terms of the kind of how we educate ourselves, how we perpetuate the values that are aligned with it, we actually have to talk about the issues of housing, and if you have a roof over your head, then the conversation around commons and in terms of kind of like reciprocity of labor can actually kick in. So all these things are very much intertwined, and segregating arts outside of these issues is something that is like shooting ourselves in the foot. And the arts actually have a really huge role in the kind of like rhizomatic thinking of the issues that are completely intertwined, and they're not isolationist. Alex, you had questions in the document. Would you like to address that? Or like just the conversation? Because the last time also you had questions, but you didn't get to actually ask them.
No, not at this time. It was more just kind of like thinking out aloud. So no, it's all good.
Okay.
Eryka had a question. Yes.
Yeah. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Yeah, this question of who are the cultural producers. I've been thinking a lot about this as I've been studying and kind of trying to collectively rewrite dance choreographer contracts. And in this process of kind of trying to rewrite them, it's like, it just creates this loop of like, this whole thing just is like not, like we can't work from this pre-existing structure of this contract because it necessitates this power dynamic that is, or this creative dynamic, this creation dynamic that really isn't very accurate. And I just keep coming back to this kind of thought about like, the artist as like so much of the protocol in contemporary art, especially when it comes to like contracts and credits and things like that, protect like the genius of the artist. You know, and this kind of thing involves, you know, collaborators, fabricators being erased, you know, in like the written history, whether it's again like the contract or the promotion or whatever. These people become erased, and just wondering if just how much the identity of the artist has been redefined by capitalism. And I even just kind of like looked up artist and the etymology dictionary, and it's like someone who cultivates a fine art. And then I start thinking back to like the dance world, which I think is maybe is apart and separate from the art world. And just like how I've heard about people being, different dancers being kind of like skeptical or condemning of like non-trained dancers, like trying to approach the dance world and like get some kind of notoriety, get some kind of like grant support. Like they don't know how to dance, like they didn't put this time, you know, into cultivating like this, you know, formalized system, et cetera, and just like how valued, like to even make or create or contribute, you have to have already like, you know, studied within an institution in order to even get to the place that you can like speak within that context, you know, or get some kind of be valued. Yeah, maybe I'll stop there.
I think that with the identity notion is interesting in relation towards social media that Dakota also mentioned, but in a generational context. I think it's, for example, social media platforms are in a way places for imprisonment of identity, body of identities, in a way that further complexifies the notion and the question of identity involved in artistic procedures and educational procedures aside. In that relation, I wanted to say that I think that we are not capable of thinking above or beside the system we are speaking about, especially because we are using linguistically shaped tools for discussing about it. Only when we find settled ground for different sets of rules and terms, we could be able to redistribute those different stratums of localities, because locality always have different stratums. Because when we speak about, I don't know, when I speak about my own locality, it's totally different than even the closest locality in my own country, and not going further from that. Those are the places of, like, we could call them enterprises of our current endeavors that are really different. So how can we think about even complying them into equilibrium state, into a state where we are really sure that we understood each other? That's the place of the truthness, as a term that is negotiable, of course. But also, all the topics that we all discussed in the meantime, I can just read a short paragraph from the text I posted for a reading suggestion, which is called Human Centipede, and it's really discussing these important topics of economical impact of art production and art distribution in the midst of neoliberal capitalism. So when we speak about capitalism or post-capitalism, we are not even sure, it's a foggy, they are really foggy terms. We are not even sure if there is post-capitalism or if there is still the capitalism we prescribe that we know as was real as such. So in a way, it's a still abstract dominant machine that is functioning as an entity, even though we cannot pinpoint or put our finger on it directly. we can just speak about lower level of segmentation and its function in the mechanism, but we cannot speak about its totality. And that's, I mean, the biggest problem. When we come to the point to be able to speak about its totality, we can then reflect upon ourselves as, let's say, agents that are able and capable to totalistically envision what this capitalism entity actually is, and how we are succumbed and infused in it, and which are navigational pathways for its exit. So I will just read fastly one segment of the text that I posted, and it continues like this. It says, however, both these enterprises, both accelerated projection and decelerated reflection, are symptomatically, as we shall argue, retrofitted into a world of cognitive templates whose nebulosing function creates a cultural fog of conceptual conflation and practical impotence. It is under the cover of its operating fog that some of the more insidious mechanisms of neoliberal capitalism are directly plugged into our cognitive infrastructure under the auspices of a world that appears earnest in its desire to extend the plasticity of imagination and expand the frontiers of action. But this is a world in which the financial closure of capitalism is cloned and grafted onto a cognitively man-made economy that accumulates false alternatives in the name of liberation of imagination and action, no different from the endlessly proliferating lifestyle options that capitalism offers us, a suture of different over-ambitious vocations driven by the wealth of waste it generates. The resulting beast is a prophetic vision of a tightly connected and controlled society with a single closed alimentary circuit, the human centipede. Those who scheme to infiltrate this world in order to militantly or cunningly liberate it from the inside are locked into the compactly segmented structure of the metametric organism, at once necessary for growth, yet expandable. Every insider is in a new addition to the iterated sequence of mouths and rectums through which the art world bootstraps itself. A miracle made possible by a simple but efficacious financial and cognitive algorithm. Dreams of acceleration and deceleration, speculative enthusiasm for the outside or critical self-reflection are revealed to be simply changes of frequency in the rate of the set iteration. So when we have this kind of metaphor and figure, which is horrific and really disgusting and really rigorous, that's the forest, the narrative forest in which we are all involved as we touch these topics already. So what is where is the point out is the thing that we should collectively somehow and on the basic language level configure as the exit from this figure. Sorry, this was longer than I wanted.
Can I reply?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So I wanted to reply both to you and to Eryka, and I mean it's that was beautiful and complex, but what I was thinking about was like, again, not trying not to get caught up in language and its institutional limitations, which is kind of paradoxical. Thinking of Eva's work within the context of this sentence, but thinking about performance art and the sort of framing of the amateur within that, and how that's relating to the dance world, and thinking through things like I can't think of names right now, but like but basically taking the everyday and making it a part of modern dance, for example, examples like that, which was part of what came out of the economic crisis of New York City. I'm thinking of a specific dancer who's very, very famous right now, who's a choreographer, but I can't think of her name. But thinking about the amateur and thinking about the way that within the context of the work that we're trying to do, we're trying to start something that's called horizontal publishing, which is thinking through the sort of blurring of authorship and a space for like non-specialist, common-centered, like authorial arena, where we are writing together. Like me and a friend right now are going to interview our mothers together, and we might invite someone else too, and we're going to talk about maternity wear within the context of the military-industrial system, like things like this, like this way that I'm very interested in this idea Darko was talking about like I don't know, kind of like, I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but kind of like almost like staring back into the abyss, you know, like demystifying from the center of the storm, from the eye of the storm, because we are in the eye of the storm, right? And I think about that too when I think about being in Brooklyn in the middle of this pandemic as well. You know, there's this way that we're in the epicenter of the epicenter of the epicenter, you know, and like looking back at you from that space and like saying to the drone, like, this question, which Anima actually posed for the workshop that we're going to do, and also just thinking about the way that, like, and coming back to the amateur and back to surrealism and thinking through the intelligence of children, for example, and our imaginary and our radical imaginary, that there's this way that asking the simple questions and making the simple connections is really where the poetics of this lies, and the artistry of this inspires me and my community and even the objects in space with us. And so this question that Anima asked was within the context of this workshop that we're doing, which is called Deceleration Rituals, Reimagining Reimagining Metrics, is if time is money and we speed up time to make more money, how can we reverse to redistribute? And that was just like a question that was like coming out of a lot of responses to when we were thinking about economy in new ways. That was a question that came up from people. Well, what about time is money? And we were just like, well, what if you just reverse that and then redistribute that? Like this way that like we could actually take these terms that we have and also redistribute them to create new contexts. Anyway, thank you so much.
I can reply very quickly to Eryka. One way to kind of like reframe the value reframe the value of art is through using intellectual property, because when things get copywritten as artwork with capital A in the constitutional law, they become part of the system, right? So we're working with the concept is, what if we copyright things that are being produced by the in-house community in Oakland, right? How would that change who are the producers and how we value their work, you know? So we're playing with very specific systems which are related to legitimizing art and artists within the system. And I think that's one way that we can look at, again, you know, who gets to say they're making art, right? Within any art, it could be from dance to visual art, right? And the second thing I wanted to say is that we have found through working in Oakland with the idea of the commons, very many problematics, you know. And so I am now tending to say something that what we're really doing is actually much more in line with Fred Moten and Under Commons, you know, in terms of theory, right? We're actually not really playing with the idea of the commons and it's in the in the form that we all agree on, kind of like, oh, we know, but we're more interested in what is the undercommons, and because we feel that also the commons signifies a very rigid system at this point, you know what I mean, and maybe quite cliquey in a way, right? So what I was saying is that even examining the very boxes we put ourselves in willingly because we want to change the world, we got to keep questioning also our own vernacular and where we're going with this, right? So last year I was so gun-ho on the commons, and my commoners here were like, wait a second, the commons, let's examine that word and what it means in the context of the local and America and so forth and so on, and who gets to play, who understands this idea of the commons, right? So so even deconstructing the ideas we come up with, I think is super important, so we started looking at different words, like assembly actually was one of them, or like undercommons, so forth and so on, just so we don't actually replicate the systems that we want to break, right? And that's why, again, we're looking at some systems that are they're setting the tone of participation in the art world, but at the same time, even while working to change this narrative, we're questioning our own reasons, our raison d'etre, and even the artists that we work with, we ask that they align with us with a moral clause or a pledge, if you will, because we think that it's important in order to build this new world that we are not on the same page, but at least we all are not creating another monster, basically, that we all agree on that to be the new future, and then we find ourselves in, again, questions of oppression, racism, representation, and so forth and so on. So I think that's interesting to consider, is like how what we are building is also able to be destructed or deconstructed even by us, in order to make it better. So just continually, brainstorming and imagining new futures.
And I don't mean to say a lot, but I just wanted to say one thing in alignment with that, and in alignment with Eva's practice, is that within ecosystems, I mean, that's the way that they function, is that they are constantly reformulating, rebuilding. I mean, that is at the core of sustainability.
Yeah.
And so if we're reimagining the economic system we want to live in, for example, or we're reimagining the world that we want to live in, and how we value one another, how we value our ideas, how we value our relationships to everything around us in space and time, then that kind of constant reevaluation and reformulation should be at the core of that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And there's a kind of anarchist sensibility about that, which I really love.
And I think that we should document this in a way, and I'm sort of like going into the idea of like documenting our progress and sort of like our thoughts and our like just having a snapshot almost that we can historically point to for all of our efforts, because I am blown away by the amazing amount of all of us today, no matter where we are, from Africa to Eastern Europe, who are working, and we have been working for a long time, and when the coronavirus happened, I was like, I'm done, because I'm so tired of working. But I think that finally I feel our efforts are being visible, and I think that I feel excited by continuing to support each other while we are somehow finding this connectivity, which is in direct response to you, actually, self-care versus community care. And that's what I've been working with in terms of defining the commons model. Is like, no, we are not going to do your project because you want to do your projects with these communities. We're going to do this project only if those communities are actually choosing to do this project. And it has to be based on trust and longevity and realness and all that stuff. So I think it's going to take a long time for all of these systems to kind of like reroute each other and for us to actually hold each other responsible and accountable for what we're doing. But I think at the moment, I'm super excited about the multitude of us who are thinking through different ways and systems. And I don't think there's one system that will work for all of us, you know, in response to some other. Krisztian, I think, was asking this question, but I'm from Eastern Europe. I find myself very much the other and dislocated in many shapes and forms here. So, but I have stopped to look for community because I think that the community is where we find each other based on community care and mutual aid, right? And we all have this one opportunity to actually change the world, you know, however corny it sounds, but it's okay to be a local initiatives, you know. I think it's great to have a multitude of suggestions. How do we actually connect on those is what I was asking with these platforms and whatever, because I do think a lot of the times we work in silos and we don't know. I'm just so excited about knowing of your projects, you know, through today and just connecting with the collective voices through these platforms of engagements and exchange and the commonality and the commons, you know. So even if that continues to be the model that we connect to in order to imagine those different futures, there may be many and there may be a multitude of voices, but and may not be a one and the same system, you know, and may be good that it's not one and the same system, but connecting with each other, I feel, is the most urgent thing right now, so we can all be aware of each other and support each other through many, even if it's like through camaraderie, solidarity, bonding. Anyway.
Think locally, work globally. Work
yeah,
globally, work locally, think globally.
I know, I was going to say that, but I'm full of cheesiness right now, so who knows?
No,
you know,
Black Panthers are never cheesy.
Okay. Yeah. So that's what I was going to say, is that I don't think that we can have one future, perhaps even, you know, and it's okay to have multitude of voices as long as those voices are like we're agreeing on the common wealth of the humanity, you know, on just basic terms, which are anti-racism, anti-oppression, exploitation, and you know, again, it's okay to have different strategies, but what we have now is this institutional pentagon, you know, so it's difficult to imagine the new things that we all engaged in. That's all.
Thank you, Natalia. Before we wrap up, it would be nice to hear people who haven't spoke so far. Does anyone want to make a comment or just share some thoughts?
I have spoken, but I can wait.
Milica, do you want to? Yeah. Oh, I just need to unmute you. Wait.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, shit.
Yeah.
It's okay now. Hi, my name is Milica. I study architecture in Belgrade and I explore the art scene and also experiment with art. And I really like this conversation. I felt like I learned a lot, and also I love the literature. And I read it a few times and like wrote some things that were important for me in my notes. From the conversation now, the autonomy that Natalia mentioned was really an interesting term for me because it depends on the context. Sometimes, well, I would like to know the difference between the autonomy of an artist and maybe of a work of art or architecture, because in architecture, when something is autonomous, it's like distance from its context. There is an example in a book from Jeremy Teal where he mentions a graveyard in Catalina. I will just find it now, where Jeremy Teal and the Aldo Rossi graveyard, you can Google it. So the drawings from the architect look completely different than the finished product, because he didn't take in consideration the contingencies and the many different things that come after just the idea. So I think it's an interesting thing to think about, the term of autonomy. And then I also liked when Eva mentioned architecture and urban space that is becoming digitalized. Maybe if, then the primary definition of architecture is that it provides shelter. So maybe we can live just in a warm and good shelter, and with this digital glasses on us. And there are so many different things. Also, when Darko mentioned from the human centipede, the sentence, I also wrote it down, because I sometimes feel that I am scheming in the art world in order to liberate it, but I feel that I'm still inside. I'm working inside of that system, but I will try to change that. So that's it.
Thank you.
Do you want me to respond? Or?
No, maybe to hear more people. Mariam, would you like to say something?
I mean, is it coming on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can hear you.
I have a lot of thoughts. I don't know what to really address. You know, I appreciate everything that everyone said, and for, you know, taking that time. This, you know, this very much feels like a space to reflect on the we and the us, and I've been, you know, hearing that a lot throughout this conversation. I'm always because I'm not, you know, I wouldn't. Oh, sorry, I didn't say who I am. I'm I wouldn't really call myself an artist, or I'm kind of like an in-between and different worlds at a, you know, transitional stage in my life and in my age and all that. But yeah, I you know, I prefer to write things down, but I guess if everyone, I just want to encourage everyone to think about the ways that I mean, you know, language has been discussed as a site of potential and the problematic, and just in the ways we use the we and the us to, you know, it's been stated, but yeah, encouraging people to think about who that is and who it includes, because in many instances I'm not really sure who it is exactly, and in thinking about the different systems that we're trying to progress towards for the future, you know, in terms of where they're coming from, as things having some sort of property, or where ideas come from. You know, I'm always thinking about the pasts that, I suppose, when we're collectively imagining the future, I guess, just encourage people to educate oneself on the places that, for example, what sounded to me like bartering was, you know, where that's rooted, and these sorts of histories, and in terms of cultural production and the I don't know if that was coherent in any way, but
Yes, and very important. Thank you.
Most of all, I just want to bring up the importance of the the abolition of policing. And what I've been thinking about recently is just in our daily lives, how the behavior of policing and surveillance and punishment is so easy for many of us to replicate in our daily lives. And yeah, that's something I just want to put out there, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you, Maria. Especially if when we talk about empowerment and the forms and directions the empowerment actually takes, or what kind of accumulation or energy and power happens in order to feel empowered, and our proximity to it. So then when we reconstruct these systems in which we want to or we desire to operate in, then the question of construction of power becomes the foundational question of like how we move forward, because it's not powerless. Like we are not negating that system.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Boshko? Yes.
Hi, yeah, I don't have anything much to add. It was just nice to hear everyone about, I think we're all at a place right now because of the current situation in the world of rethinking what the world, or how we are going to be, how we're going to work, how we're going to exist in the future, because I think a lot of things are in shift and changing, and I'm there too. I don't know necessarily that I have the answers right now. I'm thinking of those things, so it's really nice to be in a space where with people who are thinking about those things and throwing out possible solutions or directions. So it's encouraging to hear that other people are thinking about those things. So thank you, Natasha, for gathering us.
It's not just me. It's
I know, but like you're the instigator, and for everyone for being here and contributing. So I'm really glad that I was able to hear what I was, the second part.
And Boshko also does Reiki. Just so you know. Thanks. Well, we are now.
Can I add something? Okay, so I'm to introduce, I'm Jelena, and I'm also an artist, and usually I did HEKLER with Natasha and Josh. And thank you so much for all this great conversation. I really like the idea of like going back to the exchange that is not monetary, because I left New York in February prior to pandemic happening, because I couldn't stand the system, how it operates, and jobs that I was doing when it comes to art industry and everything. And I really wanted to reconnect with nature again and prepare myself to go back to Serbia, to our countryside, and continue doing stuff there. And during my time here, I stayed in Connecticut, in the woods, to kind of recover a little bit. So pandemic kicked in, and then I stayed here and I continued like learning stuff about nature, reconnecting again, and doing stuff related to planting and that kind of things. So, and connected with the community here more. And there was this moment when I started making like pies and breads for people here in the neighborhood. And there is like this work that involved building patio, recovering windows, doors, that kind of stuff. And there was this one really lovely moment where I made burek, that it's something that it's like unknown to people here, and people really loved it. And there's this guy, James, who is a farmer, works on a farm for 19 years, and he was just like stunned with the taste, and he brought me rock to make a patio. And we asked him like, what is the amount of money, we need to get? And he's like, oh, burek is enough. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. So that idea of the exchange, I mean, it still exists, like in rural areas, in communities. It's just like, I don't know what is the way to bring that back into the cities and like capitals, but people are definitely open for that kind of exchange, and it's there, it's alive. You just need to be fortified with like interaction of different kinds of communities. And so, and there is this article that I stumbled upon, like that is related to farming and farmers that organized in the United States, that made a subtle shift in farming and created this huge change when it comes to crops, like actually getting vegetables for something that is, I will send the link so you can read more about it, but it's about like making a small change within already existing systems and actually creating something new that is larger and can like feed the families and feed, communities for free. So I will just.
Can you tell give an example what they actually did?
So there is just a second, because I'm not like in materia when it comes to farming. Just a second. So they had this cover crop that they changed the vegetables that they were planting. So they made the farm more diverse when it comes to stuff that they started planting. And so there came the switchment where the amount of products was larger, so they can actually feed the communities there. And so just a second, how I can.
You can just share it in the
I wanna send. I'm not digital. How to send the group?
You can just send it in chat.
Yeah, but I'm now in some private. Wait a second. How to go out of the private chat?
Scroll on the top, and everyone should be there.
Yeah, I am.
Just put it in the document.
Okay, I will put it in a document where you can read more about it. But it's a cool example, I think, how subtle changes within existing systems can create impactful change. That's all.
Thank you.
Can I say one last thing just in response to Mariam? Is that okay? Okay, yeah. I just wanted to say that I haven't really talked much about this, and it's interesting that it's come out in more of like a broader conversation, because there is something about specificity that's so important, especially when we're considering the we. But our work, the work of New Economies of the Internet, is centering queer, trans people of color. And when I talk about the anti-colonial, we are looking at things like, when we speak about anarchy, what is that actually coming out of? Like, what are the actual like cultural roots of things like modernism? Like, all of these ideas didn't just like come out of modernism and in no history. Like, I think that question and that proposal is actually at the core of what we're thinking through, and at the core of also bringing in questions of like dream logic, because dream logic in itself is something that is a broad concept and is tying back to Western art and surrealism, but is a way to sort of like think about decolonizing that, and even decolonizing the term decolonizing. There's a Native American digital artist, Tiara Roxanne, who talks about the problem with even the term decolonization, and the problem with the concept of healing, that actually there is no healing within the context of peoples who have been disenfranchised by these systems, but it's actually a need for rehabilitation. I'm constantly being rehabilitated. There is no healing. This is a historical, systematic, intergenerational body trauma that is part of the psychic psyche of this kind of making and doing and being that is our everyday life, which is just being in our bodies. But yeah, I just wanted to speak to that because that is like so real, and that is so important, and it's interesting to be, especially as someone who is like somewhat white passing, and to be in a mostly, but it's also different because it's also important to think about like, what does it mean to be in an Eastern European context? What does it mean to be in an immigrant context? And I think all of these things speak to the reason why New Economies, New Internet is connected with HEKLER, and why I've done work with HEKLER over time, because there has been such deep, deep solidarity. That was all.
Thank you, Sahar. Amina, would you like to say something? Amina? Oh, I need to unmute you. Oh, wait. Okay, you're on.
I really enjoyed all the conversations. Thank you so much. Thank you. Mohammed just joined me with his big beard.
Hi.
Yeah, no, that was a very powerful conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Mohammed,
oh, come on. Do you want to say that thing about art?
Oh, my teacher. But I think it's again going back to the etymology of the word as well, that, you know, we reference art, you know, from a Western perspective as artifice or, you know, but my teacher who passed away recently told us that to think about art as to be, you know, very Shakespearean, of course, but thou art. And if, you know, to be truly human. And this dialogue is really about what it means to be truly human. You know, whether we're speaking about the we or the way how we collectively try and transform something, it is about trying to be truly human. And so, you know, I like art as to be. Thou art. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm not sure, are we ending the conversation? Because this is really an awesome place to be in right now. I kind of like don't want it to end. But we can also continue. I'm down. So
definitely.
Whoever feels like you need to rest and leave the space, thank you so much for being here. If you want to continue the conversation, we can do that as well. It's completely up to you. And actually, no, I think that the hosts are, you guys are determining like what's happening.
We are responsible for the rest of the night. For me, the night, and for you, the evening, I guess.
Oh, exactly.
For me, it's 3:30. For me, it's 3:30 in the afternoon, and I just had the second beer. So cheers,
Okay,
everyone.
I've already passed the midnight. So.
And Darko, it's 1 a.m. It's your,
No, I'm traveling to Belgrade tomorrow at 7 in the morning, and now it's almost 1 in the morning, so I will not sleep. I will pack my stuff and yeah, listen to music. We can now make a small party to put out the Balkan White sounds, I guess. That would be cool.
Yes.
But also just conclude with one thing. I think that we could work on not just our nature, but more on our chronology, like focus on our chronology more than just being making excuses upon our nature. You know, it's always easy to say, yeah, it's because of me, that's how and who I am. But I think when we are constituting ourselves as self-aware agents and selves, we could just make our own chronology, like, oh, really, I'm really better than a month ago, and so on. And that was like one important stuff and thing that I wanted to say for the end before the music. So who's gonna start first? I stumbled upon one YouTube channel which has really amazing and strange sources from, for example, 60s, 70s, 80s especially, really like dark wave Yugoslavian kind of music, which is really like from nowhere archived. And I will send the link of the.
Can you share
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I will send the link of the whole channel, but it's like enormous amount of sounds, and some of them are really extremely experimental. Yeah, I will not go into the genres, but you'll see. Here it is. This is the channel.
So maybe I should say something very quickly, but I have offered to the co-host of this fabulous panel that promotes Gallery in Commons, which is also we have a printing press with 2 Rhizome printers and 1 regular printer. But I have offered, of course, to produce some kind of a book or something to that extent. And I just wanted to mention that because it might be important for you all to know that we are cooking up some kind of like a book after these conversations. So I don't know.
Yes, that's really amazing. Yeah, that's amazing.
So anyway.
Yeah, and from my understanding, it's so it's an opportunity to kind of create a zine where, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we're doing the exquisite corpse, but because of the nature of the conversation, maybe you guys we can extend it to some kind of a toolbox for us. You know, maybe we can begin actually charting those words that we talked about today. I was thinking in the format of exquisite corpse, we can do that, and then we can support anybody else as an offshoot of doing exquisite corpse, either within their own practice or communities or whatnot. And we can have a series of imaginaries that are emerging through this process of exquisite corpse. That's what I was thinking about. But anyway, but I just wanted to mention that because again, you know, I want everybody to feel included, but also to just say that because I don't know what kind of rights we have to release after that, but some of the things in the chat, I hope they make it to the book because they're so great. I've been looking at the chat anyway.
I'm willing to help with the editing of the transcription, so you can contact me.
And I'm willing to help with the design.
Please. Yes.
Oh, thanks, Krisztian, for this one. I was just searching for this one, also this one channel. Like, yeah, it's a good one. Thanks.
And I also wanted to thank everybody and to say that we have at least for 1 more or 2 more conversation, I think, from the themes we had discussed earlier, but one of them being hospitality. But maybe, maybe as I was thinking through all what we've talked and how, and then what Mariam said in the end, who are we when we talk about we? One of my to-dos in terms of trying to get to my ideal goals is to try to make alliances to people as different from me as possible. I don't know what this look like, but I have the feeling that if I investigate and inquire enough, I could. So that will be on my to-do list for next time.
What do you mean by different?
Well, as I understood, it's like an opposition from the way in which she didn't understand herself.
Well, I don't like opposition in terms that I don't believe in binaries. I think we all have the myriad of different ways, but thank you for trying to translate my rambling. Yeah. Well, I was thinking, when I was thinking about hospitality and about what we were trying to achieve, which seems impossible almost, I was thinking of fairy tales, of myths, and how the heroes or the beings in the fairy tales achieve what they want, which happens to be what the majority or a lot of beings want, and they achieve it through, first of all, making really wild associations or alliances with fantastical beings, with animals, with rivers, with mountains, with hair, with whatever, and then taking huge leaps of faith or trust, and then being completely defiant to what the present presents them with. Not accepting the given, but imagining something and taking the leap to do it. But usually happens with the help of very fantastical associations, friends.
I just want to check if Lulu and Alisa are here, because I never know when people have their names. Do you guys want to, both Alisa and Lulu are amazing artists, and it would be really great to hear you.
Yes, I'm here. I'm Lulu.
Hi, Lulu.
Just a sec.
Hi.
Hi.
Really nice to meet you all.
Yeah, it's really great, and thank you very much for inviting me to this. I just through the whole time that I've been thinking, like, there are many thoughts that I have in mind, but like say the first is when Natalia, you were talking about partnership, and I was really thinking like, there are many questions that has been posed through the time, and so like Torok, you were saying like how do we do it, and then what's the solution and all this, and I also have many questions from myself and from like the situation and many things, and oftentimes I feel like those questions that I don't have answer, I never have really have the answer, like how can we resolve them as me as an individual or we as a collective. But then being on this gathering, I find something like really reassuring is that we keep post these questions, and then we think about them, and maybe and also eventually that we move to a direction that's more desirable for us. Yeah.
Do you want to say, Lulu, do you want to say something about your project of mapping? Yeah.
What? Huh?
Do you want to share a bit about your project of mapping?
That's quite a share. Yeah, I am currently working on a mapping project inspired by this whole pandemic situation. So end of January, I came back from Taiwan, and that's the beginning of the coronavirus started to go to Taiwan, and I came back here, and nothing was happening here. But then I started to checking first with the people back in Taiwan, but then with the outbreak more and more, and then I started to check in with like all the people that I care and love, and at the beginning I find it was quite helpless to see this like coronavirus map. I'm not sure if maybe there are different versions, but basically just a map. It's a visual map by showing you how many people have been confirmed that got the coronavirus. So I started to make a counter visual map of people that I love and care. I pinned them on a map, and then so I create it's hard to, maybe
share the link.
Just bear me a second, maybe. I think it would be easier to talk about. I'm not, So this is what I've been making now. So it's a map that I invite people to. So at first I made my own map of the people that I check in, and then I invite people to just participate. And so creating this map, and for me it's like, because the coronavirus map is like too traumatizing, I want to make something that to visually, as a reminder that there are many people out there that we love and care, And love and care is more contagious than like the virus, I believe. Yeah, that's the thing I'm doing right now, and I invite you all to participate if you want. Yeah, that's it.
Can you put a link on the chat for that?
Oh yeah, sure.
Thanks, Lulu.
Yeah, thank you.
Alisa, do you want to? It's so awesome to see you. Wait, I'm gonna mute you.
Hi, sorry, I joined pretty late. It sounds like I missed a very great conversation.
No, no worries. I mean, we are also like going in 1 hour over, so it's an ongoing conversation.
Nice. I guess I could share what I'm working on if that's the.
And where are you right now? Are you in the West Coast?
Yeah, I'm in West Coast. I'm kind of quarantined with my mom. It's been a little intense because she's just very conservative evangelical. So just politically, but also religiously. And I think our whole household is just like getting ready for the rapture. And I'm trying to have healthy boundaries, but it's quite difficult. The project I'm working on now is like, I hope everyone is aware of what's happening in Northwest China in Xinjiang. So I'm hoping that it will be like a video art project, but also a documentary film. And I've been collecting, kind of maintaining an archive of all the leaked footages that's been coming out. I'm amassing all this stuff, and I'm just trying to figure out what to do with this material. And it's been very difficult to fundraise or to get support because of how sensitive it is.
Can you just quickly introduce the context, because it's very much tied also in terms of, especially when it comes to surveillance capitalism and how it's being used against practically towards the genocide of Muslim.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this has just been a very ongoing thing, and Xinjiang is like directly means new frontier. It has like this, we're going to go develop this area that hasn't been developed yet, but there's indigenous Uyghurs who have lived there, I don't know, for thousands of years. And since 9/11, China was able to use the anti-terrorism and the Islamophobia aspect to target them. And in the last 15 to 20 years, China has invested most of their money and resources in artificial and AI surveillance, basically. And they were the first people who developed predictive crime that is being used everywhere now. And Uyghurs are the test group for it. So they could track everything in your chat, to what you buy, to what you click on, and that could generate a profile if you're going to commit a terrorist act. That's besides collecting kind of biometric data if you're from age 7 and up. So the oppression is like not just the concentration camps that's going on, it's also just everywhere you go, it's TSA. And I was just really shocked the year that I was there in 2017, and that was when they were starting to build the camps. And there were places I wanted to go see, and I wasn't able to go. And later I look at the map, and these are the places that they were erecting camps. So those, just that because I was there, it became very, very personal. And it was also the first time I have really experienced what white privilege must be like in America, because I would be waved through security line, and sometimes there are separate lines for Uyghurs and non-Uyghurs. And with surveillance, it's really, really creepy, because at one part they're forced to perform in a lot of ways, even just culturally. So another aspect I'm trying to get into with the project is from a tourist perspective, because at this, one of the propaganda machine is that they're drumming up domestic tourism there, trying to promote like this multicultural diversity that is under the motivation of this global infrastructure they're building. It's very, very strange to go to these villages that are specifically fenced up to get fees, and they have to perform these little acts, and it's so desolated because most of the people have disappeared, and you have to just kind of like be very careful like who you can talk to, if you engage with them or not, because they can get in trouble immediately. So how do you protect the identities while at the same time amplifying like messages that they want to send, and also how to get support but not, because it's in America at least, it's very hard because there's so much anti-China sentiment. So they did pass the Uyghur Human Rights Act, but it's mostly for the trade work rather than actual humanitarian concerns. There's just so much conflict of interest, but it's just like a very undeveloped project right now. So it's just like, I'm just vomiting things.
I mean, that's a really amazing project. I mean, it's just like it's logistically, it is so complicated, and especially when it comes to the question of documentation and archiving, like how do you even make a record in a place that doesn't allow tools to actually extrapolate any kind of information outside of it? And I remember during our conversation that was like, even, you know, a year ago or 2 years ago, that was the main issue. And it really does become the question of, you know, context, like when it comes to use of technology, and especially kind of like reproduction of images and like mediating imagery, like when that is not possible and when those tools don't exist, like how do you actually create like a liable record of, you know, series of events that can go towards.
Definitely, and I also would just want to amplify a lot of the resistance that is happening too, and kind of really ingenious ways of people sneaking out videos and what's happening. And one of them is like teenagers, mostly women. They would do makeup tutorials and talk about what's happening in Xinjiang. So that's one of the ways to kind of make art under censorship that I find pretty inspirational.
Awesome, thank you for sharing. So great to have you here.
Talking about technology, may I ask you all a question about what you think about the pandemic being caused by 5G network development? I was gonna say it makes them, but because we're talking about again technology, like what the hell? Anyway, those images that leaked, actually, that's what I was remembering, the dead birds, the dead bats, and the guy with the, you know, the suit who was installing the 5G in China. And then the idea 2 weeks later, we have the first case, you know. Anyway, I just think that it's interesting to think about.
I really adore conspiracy theories. I mean, it feeds up this world with entertainment, and not just entertainment. It has some kind of aspect of fictionalization of current state, which is really precious. So yeah, I love those like misleading trails of different combined theories, which makes another belief. So I don't know, I'm not sure about to answer the question, but this was just meant to be addressed to the conspiracies. I love them. I mean, if they are not here, we would be bored. Definitely. Sorry.
But I mean, in terms of talking about like new imaginaries, these like kind of theories are the like amazing pool in terms of actually kind of like both perpetuating but also like deconstructing the system from which they're coming, and especially kind of have the diagram of 5G anti-vaxxer
Bill Gates,
how that like all ties in together, and then Bill Gates being the face of the vaccine that is being developed in like I'm kind of like, you know, like it's not, you know, it, as you said, it's an interesting entertainment that has like a both mechanical and kind of echoing destructive effects, and that we are going to, you know, we're kind of living through that process, but also we're going to see how that actually unfolds. But the
yeah, but it's also unavoidable.
Like Eva, you know, can talk more about in terms of, you know, creating a myth or a legend or a it's like using that kind of mechanics to cope with the situation.
It is creating myths, but also it's creating self-fulfilling prophecies. I mean, whatever it's propagated right now will have ripple effects on everything that it's being lived on the next day and the next day and the next day. And the problem with deep fakes or with conspiracy, which seem so plausible that they're indistinguishable from reality, is that they are indistinguishable. So I think it's our role to create myths and realities and simulations which are indistinguishable from reality, because if we leave this to be created by people who want to divide us, to be racist, to be pointing fingers, and to be distracting us while they rob the little economic riches there left. So we have to understand that there is a huge potential, but also a huge danger in creation in these things.
And it's interesting to bring that up. Yeah, sorry.
I was thinking about this first as tragedy, then as farce, and how Foster published a book asking what's after farce, what is after, and we do. I think analyzing and laughing but not laughing at things is important, like with these conspiracies and stuff.
Well, it's interesting to think about how these theories collide in relation to the systems that we, especially when it comes to collectivity and commons and agency, how these kind of like different entities have their own texture, and then based on that texture we kind of soak and connect. But like in terms of the conspiracy theories, especially you know, when I think in Serbia or in Balkans, this kind of like phantasmagoric ideas that are rooted in kind of like semi-truths, because they're not complete like fantasies. So there is always, in order for it to be kind of believable, there has to be an aspect of facts within the narrative. But then it's really interesting how, since the, you know, like vaccine as and you know, the whole 5G thing it's, you know, practically kind of a criticism of biopolitics, then we it's, you know, it's closely tied to also anti-migrant movements, where, you know, you can easily see the pattern of kind of like who gravitates, like that texture, how it actually is being activated, and what kind of ideas, you know, people are ready to embrace, and kind of collectivity within those ideas. So in that sense, I completely agree with Eva, where yes, there is an entertainment to it, but also like there is nothing entertaining about it. It's a matter of kind of like very lethal congregation of ideas that are being fortified.
And I think going back to the idea of being culturally different and being, especially in America, where we all come from somewhere else and have our experiences, all I was going to say is that I think that we have different things that trigger us, like Eastern Europe, and we talked about that. It's kind of like familiar with media and propaganda domination and government domination, but I feel that that is a question that is being asked here in a way more seriously, because the effect of the government propaganda, it's lost on a lot of people because America is such a big country, you know what I mean? So I find myself a lot of the times, as somebody who has lived through communism and all kinds of other things, right? Like being completely aware of these situations, and I feel that some other people who are born and raised here, and especially young people, are very susceptible to this kind of propaganda and media, and I think our job is to dispel that, absolutely, you know, through the mapping. Thank you so much, Lulu. That's an amazing project, you know, and through everything we do to kind of like dissipate, and we talked about fear and trauma, you know, trauma before, but just to like hold each other, you know, in a way, no matter how different we are, you know, that we owe to each other to at least question this, you know, question these behaviors, you know, because again, I feel much less susceptible to media and conspiracy theory because I've lived through it, but then I see my fellow commoners sometimes completely being gullible, and those are radical people, and those are leftists and anarchists, you know, but they are susceptible to this, you know, because of their cultural upbringing. That's about it, you know.